In the early 1st century AD, the Roman Empire was at the peak of its power. Its borders stretched from the Nile to the Atlantic, encompassing the entire Mediterranean region, including Gaul, Spain, Anatolia, North Africa, and many provinces that shared the tranquility brought by the Pax Romana under Roman institutions. In addition, the empire was surrounded by grandeur and splendor. City squares were adorned with colossal monuments, public buildings, and magnificent temples. However, behind this splendid facade, there was much more than meets the eye. Roman politics had always been in the grip of relentless power struggles. The dynamics of imperial politics were shaped by constant pressure represented by different forces. And this situation was not unique to the institution of the Principate built by Augustus alone. The streets of Republican Rome had often been stained with blood for a seat in the Senate or consulship. Despite all this, Caligula was born in the peaceful city of Antium in central Italy during a period when Rome's politics seemed calm. In the year 12 AD, his uncle Tiberius became emperor in 14 AD as the last surviving heir of Augustus. During these years, Caligula spent most of his time near the Roman legion camp on the Rhine River, alongside his father Germanicus. His fame quickly rivaled that of his father. Even at the age of 3 or 4, he dressed like a soldier, engaged in drills with them, and cheered them on. Soldiers wanted him to join every campaign, believing he brought good luck. Wearing the legionary boots called caligae and getting lost in them, he was nicknamed Little Boot by them. Although he rejected this title throughout his life, he would be remembered by this name even 2,000 years after his death. Caligula's good fortune did not last long. His father Germanicus's rise did not escape the notice of his uncle Emperor Tiberius. Now, Rome's calm politics were gradually beginning to stir. When Germanicus fell ill and died suddenly in 19 AD while in Antioch, it seemed that his death had occurred naturally. However, Caligula's mother Agrippina quickly accused Tiberius of foul play. From this point on, things started to take a turn for the worse for the family. First, his mother Agrippina and brother Nero were accused of treason and sent into exile. Caligula, along with his sisters, was entrusted to his grandmother Livia Augusta, and after her death, to Antonia Minor. Before long, another brother, Drusus Caesar, was also sent into exile. According to the historian Suetonius, Caligula lived almost like a prisoner under the watchful eyes of Tiberius's soldiers during these years. In addition, Tiberius's paranoia deepened day by day. As intrigues turned into conspiracies, the palace responded with purges and executions. But the anger towards Tiberius led to the sprouting of new plots. Finally, in 31 AD, Sejanus, the commander of the Praetorian Guard, was accused of betraying Tiberius. Until the execution letter was read in the Senate, he had no knowledge of anything. Macro, who carried out the execution, became the new leader of the Praetorian Guard. From now on, he would be the de facto ruler of Rome. Caligula was intuitive, intelligent, and highly skilled in natural acting. As a result, despite some family members being killed, he managed to survive. At the age of 19, he was brought to Capri to be with Tiberius and was declared his heir. Another heir was Tiberius's surviving son Gemellus. When Tiberius died in 37 AD during a trip to Italy, the most suitable candidate for the throne, who had reached adulthood, was Caligula, according to Tacitus. According to him, Caligula had collaborated with Macro in the death of Tiberius, so much so that the emperor, who was claimed to have been poisoned, was strangled to death by Macro, the leader of the Praetorian Guard. when he momentarily regained consciousness and wanted to eat. Caligula's reign was enthusiastically welcomed by the people. The atmosphere of terror created in the final years of Tiberius had cast a shadow over all of Rome's official institutions. Caligula represented the beginning of a new era and hope for Rome and its people, so much so that they called him son. However, the realization that this new era was not much better than the previous one would not take long. According to Suetonius, Caligula's excesses began in his youth. His inclination towards alcohol, entertainment, and women was his biggest weakness. In addition, he took pleasure in causing pain to criminals and torturing them. However, under Tiberius's supervision, he had to suppress these feelings considerably. Nevertheless, the first days of his empire went quite well. A general amnesty was declared. It was announced that spies would no longer be used, and splendid entertainments and feasts were organized. Free wheat aid was provided to the people. In addition, Caligula was quite respectful towards the Senate. He issued bulletins explaining the state of the state to the public. He made various initiatives to expedite state affairs. The construction of the Temple of Augustus and the Pompey Theater, initiated during the time of Tiberius, was rapidly completed. Rome was living in abundance, surrounded by its usual splendor and grandeur. However, this would not last long. The darkness was approaching. Towards the end of the year 37 AD, Caligula suffered from a severe illness. Everyone thought that his death was imminent. Nevertheless, he managed to cling to life, and finally, he woke up having overcome the illness, but he was no longer the old Caligula. Seeing that state affairs had proceeded smoothly and his absence disturbed him. The institutions of the Republic had not yet completely disappeared. Republicans could still find a place for themselves in the Senate. In addition, the emperor's power was not absolute. His position at the pinnacle of the political order was always in jeopardy. Under all these overwhelming realities, the paranoia that he would be assassinated took root in Caligula's mind. First, he began to experience sleep problems. He could sleep no more than 3 hours a night, and his sleep was interrupted by strange and frightening nightmares. After a while, his irritability began to manifest in his daily life. Due to his illness, he suspected and dismissed Macro, one of his main commanders, from duty. But purges did not stop there. Before long, he removed other high-ranking officials one by one. The palace was filled with some aristocratic young people who had no experience but had gained fame on the stage or in the arena. Whispers of dissatisfaction were circulating throughout the city. However, these were just the beginning. Caligula's paranoia would soon turn into an uncontrollable madness. Clusters of strange stories around him depict his excessive cruelty, multiple and unusual love affairs, or disrespect towards the Senate. Suetonius describes his relationships with his sisters, selling the wives of high-ranking Senate members to the highest bidders, his ridiculous military activities in the north, declaring his beloved horse Incitatus as consul, ordering everyone to shave their heads to his baldness complex, and his habit of walking in the corridors of the palace while commanding the sun to rise at night. These excesses and cruelties did not take long to affect those around him. When Antonia Minor, who had once cared for him, died, instead of honoring her, he preferred to watch her funeral in the palace hall accompanied by Emil. He forced his father-in-law Silenus to commit suicide by cutting his throat. His relationship with his sister Drusilla was just one of many continuous palace scandals. Although the death of his beloved sister had a profound impact on Caligula, it did not last long. He honored her as a goddess and plunged back into a life of pleasure. He summoned Lallia Paulina, who was married to former consul Gaius Memmius, and forced her to divorce her husband and marry him instead. After a brief relationship of about 6 months, he separated from her and married Caesonia, who was now the mother of 3 children. His love life began to encompass everyone, men, women, the young, the old, and turned into a kind of debauchery. The tension between the power centers in Rome eventually brought Caligula into conflict with the Senate. He began to insult the senators on every occasion, listening to their requests while riding in his chariot, urging them to run behind him to catch up. He treated many of them as his servants. He openly engaged with the wives of senators and openly discussed who was better or worse in bed. Constant paranoia of being assassinated occupied his mind, eventually leading to systematic executions. His most trusted man, Macro, and Gemellus, whom he had adopted as a son after becoming emperor, were among the first victims of these executions. The horror he created quickly turned the empire into a grinding machine of human lives. Some senators, considered lucky, were sent into exile as minors, while the majority were forced to fight wild animals in the arenas. The maintenance costs of these animals were high, so many accused individuals were fed to them. Caligula preferred their deaths to be slow and torturous, with constant small blows, rather than a quick or random death. The combination of mismanagement and excessive extravagance quickly depleted the treasury left by Tiberius. Grain reserves were closed, and the people were left to their fate. Budgets were cut, and imperial funds were allocated to meet Caligula's personal needs. However, his excesses could not be restrained, and when he realized he had nothing left, he began collecting donations from the public under the pretext of his daughter's birth. New laws and regulations made him the sole legal heir in the country. The properties of the senators he killed would now be his inheritance. This law brought more death and blood to the empire, and more money and extravagance to the emperor. In a personal challenge, Caligula went even further by ordering the heads of Greek god statues in Greece to be cut off and brought to Rome. Many artists were commissioned to create busts of Caligula so that they could be mounted on the headless statues. Priests who served and worshipped on his behalf were appointed. Flamingos, peacocks, jungle fowl, guinea fowls, and ostriches were now sacrificed in his name. While the deification of Roman emperors after their deaths was not foreign to the Roman people and the Senate, Caligula had declared himself a god before his death. He dressed like a god and demanded to be treated as one. Yet, he had not achieved any military success as an earthly leader. In an attempt to remedy this deficiency, he set out in the year 40 AD to conquer Britain with his army. He aimed to regain his tarnished reputation among the Roman people with this campaign. However, his own soldiers' lack of trust in Caligula eventually led them to refuse to cross the English Channel. Nevertheless, the emperor did not want to return to Rome empty-handed. Realizing that he could not conquer Britain, he still wanted to achieve a victory against the sea god Neptune. Therefore, he ordered his soldiers to collect seashells on the shores of the English Channel. These spoils were to be considered a symbol of his victory over the god Neptune. Caligula's army achieved limited success in Germania during this campaign. However, these achievements were not comparable to those of his father Germanicus or his grandfather Drusus. In the late 40 AD and early 41 AD, a series of conspiracies were organized, targeting not only Caligula, but also the Principate regime. The capital was shaken by the failure of Caligula's campaign and the empire's descent into chaos, to extravagance and recklessness. The majority of senators were in favor of taking action sooner rather than later. Moreover, Caligula's tyranny, arrogance, and unpredictability had caused Praetorian guards, and thus the army, to lose confidence in him. Finally, this conspiracy penetrated even close family members. However, Caligula sensed the danger and, after returning from the campaign, refused to enter the city for 3 months. He issued a series of frightening proclamations, threatening and reminding everyone that he was a god. Yet, Caligula's power over the regime was diminishing rapidly. Therefore, despite some purges at the end of the year 40 AD, the hardcore conspirators were never eliminated. In late January of 41 AD, Caligula left the arena of the Palatium Games, using the excuse of having a meal and taking a bath. Tunnels built under the Palatium provided quick access to the palace. However, this route was too deserted and dangerous. At some point during his journey, a group of soldiers blocked Caligula's path, and the emperor was repeatedly stabbed to death. As the historian Cassius Dio observed, during this moment, Caligula discovered firsthand that he was not a god. After the emperor's death, Rome fell into a brief period of chaos. Republicans began loudly advocating for the advantages of the Libertas regime. However, the Praetorian Guards acted quickly, finding Caligula's uncle Claudius hiding in the palace and declaring him emperor. Senators continued their resistance for a while, but the outcome remained unchanged. It took a full 8 years after Caesar's death in 44 BC for republicanism to be crushed. After Caligula's death, this was achieved within 24 hours. Much of what we know about Caligula comes from Suetonius, who wrote about him nearly 80 years after his death, as well as the accounts of Cassius Dio and Tacitus, and the records kept by Seneca, who referred to him as a monster. Both contemporaries and some modern historians view Caligula as a sociopath unable to control his ambitions and desires, an arrogant but inadequate ruler, and an emperor with unstable mental balance. However, in recent years, there has been an effort to understand his actions rather than harshly condemn him. Even by this understanding, Caligula led a life filled with cruelty and immorality that cannot be considered innocent. Thank you for watching.